On a cold Christmas night in 1989, the snow fell heavy over Fenton, New York. The roads were slick, the air was sharp, and inside a pickup truck, headed down a rural road, sat one of baseball's most combustible legends, Billy Martin, the fiery former manager of the New York Yankees, and a man who once stood as a World Series hero, would never make it home again. When the truck skidded off the icy road and rolled down an embankment, Martin was killed instantly. It was Christmas Day, and a man who had lived his entire life under the brightest lights of baseball died in the quiet shadows of a winter night. His death was as sudden and dramatic as the life he lived, a life marked by triumph, controversy, brilliance, and volatility. To many, Billy Martin was the very definition of contradiction. Brilliant strategist, yet reckless risk-taker, beloved hero, yet relentless fighter, loyal teammate, yet explosive adversary. Tonight, we trace not just the tragic end of Billy Martin, but the winding path that made him one of the most unforgettable figures in Major League Baseball history. His story is not just one of baseball, it is a story of passion, imperfection, and legacy. Billy Martin's journey began far from the grandeur of Yankee Stadium lights. Born Alfred Manuel Martin Jr. in Berkeley, California in 1928, his upbringing was shaped by struggle and resilience. Raised primarily by his Italian-American mother, he grew up in a modest household that instilled in him both toughness and resourcefulness. Billy's childhood was marked by a scrappy determination that would later define his identity on the field. He was smaller than most kids his age, often underestimated, but he compensated with an intensity that set him apart. Baseball became his outlet, his escape, and his calling. The sandlots of California were his training grounds, and every game was played with a desperation to prove that size and background were no barriers to greatness. When Martin entered professional baseball, it was not with the fanfare that accompanied some of his Yankee teammates. He was not Mickey Mantle, blessed with transcendent athletic gifts, nor Joe DiMaggio, a polished icon. Martin was different. He clawed for every opportunity, playing with an edge that sometimes unnerved opponents and even his own teammates. But what Martin lacked in raw talent, he made up for with heart, intelligence, and relentless drive. By the early 1950s, he had earned his place with the Yankees, not as their superstar, but as their spark plug. The 1952 World Series cemented Martin's place in baseball lore. In a moment that remains one of the most iconic defensive plays in Yankee history, he raced in from second base to make a miraculous catch on Jackie Robinson's pop-up. The play was more than just a highlight, it symbolized everything Martin stood for: hustle, instinct, and fearless determination. The following year, in the 1953 World Series, Martin's bat carried the Yankees. His clutch hitting earned him the Most Valuable Player award, and for a brief moment, Billy Martin was not just the scrappy underdog, he was the hero. Yet even in triumph, Martin's contradictions surfaced. While teammates celebrated his skill and heart, his fiery temper often led him into conflict. He clashed with opponents, with umpires, and sometimes even with his own manager. His nights off the field were just as intense as his days on it. Stories of late-night fights, barroom brawls, and an unquenchable thirst for competition followed him everywhere. Perhaps no moment symbolized this duality more than the infamous Copacabana incident in 1957. At a nightclub in New York, a celebration turned violent. And though Martin wasn't the only Yankee present, he bore the brunt of the blame. The Yankees, embarrassed by the scandal, shipped him off in a trade soon after. A World Series MVP was gone, not because of performance, but because of personality. That exile from the Yankees as a player became the turning point of his life. Martin bounced around the league as a utility infielder, never again reaching the heights of his Yankee days. But in those journeyman years, he was absorbing lessons, sharpening his mind, and preparing for his true calling, not as a player, but as a manager. He understood the game in a way few others did. He had an instinct for strategy, a knack for motivating players, and a willingness to push the boundaries of conventional baseball wisdom. When Martin entered managing, he brought with him all the intensity that had defined his playing career. His style was electric, aggressive, and confrontational. He demanded maximum effort from his players, and in return, he gave everything he had. His managerial career became a whirlwind of success, scandal, and spectacle. With the Minnesota Twins, the Detroit Tigers, the Texas Rangers, the Oakland A's, and of course, multiple stints with the Yankees, Martin left a mark everywhere he went. He had a reputation for turning struggling teams into contenders, often in record time. His secret weapon was not just his tactical mind, but his ability to instill belief. Under Martin, players felt they could do the impossible. Yet Martin's brilliance was always shadowed by volatility. He argued with umpires so fiercely that ejections became routine. He challenged his own players when he felt their effort was lacking, sometimes publicly humiliating them. Most famously, he feuded with Yankees owner George Steinbrenner, a man whose own temperament was every bit as fiery as Martin's. Their relationship was a storm, passionate, explosive, and destined for repeated collisions. Steinbrenner hired and fired Martin 5 times, a revolving door that became a running joke in baseball, but also a testament to Martin's undeniable ability to deliver results. The pinnacle of Martin's managerial success came in 1977, when he led the Yankees to a World Series championship. That season was marked not only by on-field triumph, but also by behind-the-scenes chaos. Martin and superstar Reggie Jackson clashed openly, their feud culminating in a nationally televised dugout confrontation. For most managers, such a spectacle would have spelled disaster. For Martin, it became part of his legend. He was the manager who fought for control, who refused to be overshadowed, and who wore his emotions on his sleeve. When the Yankees triumphed, Martin stood as both hero and lightning rod, but success could never quiet the storm inside him. His battles with Steinbrenner escalated, and his off-field habits, drinking, late-night escapades, and unfiltered comments to the press only deepened the tension. In 1978, after a particularly volatile stretch, Martin resigned. In typical Billy Martin fashion, he did not go quietly. At the press conference announcing his resignation, he quipped about Steinbrenner and Jackson, delivering a memorable line that highlighted his wit and bitterness. It was pure Billy, raw, candid, and unforgettable. Even after resignations and firings, Martin's presence in baseball never faded. Every time he was dismissed, another opportunity arose. Owners recognized his brilliance, even if they feared his combustibility. With the Oakland A's in the early 1980s, Martin unveiled his most famous innovation, Billy Ball. This aggressive style of play emphasized speed, daring base running, and relentless pressure on opponents. In an era when home runs and power hitting dominated, Martin's approach was a throwback to old-school baseball with a modern twist. Fans loved it. The A's surged under his leadership, and for a brief moment, Martin reinvented the game. But the intensity of Billy Ball came at a cost. His demand for aggressive play often wore down his pitchers and players. Critics accused him of overusing his starters, pushing arms beyond their limits in pursuit of victory. Once again, Martin's brilliance carried the seeds of his own undoing. His tenure in Oakland, like so many before, ended abruptly. As the 1980s drew to a close, Martin remained a figure both celebrated and controversial. The Yankees, in particular, could never fully quit him. Steinbrenner, despite their endless feuds, often hinted at bringing Martin back yet again. The relationship between the two men was like a volatile marriage, filled with passion, conflict, and an unbreakable bond. It was widely rumored that Steinbrenner intended to rehire Martin in the early 1990s. Fate, however, intervened. On December 25, 1989, Billy Martin's life ended. He was a passenger in a truck driven by his friend William Reedy. The roads were icy, the night unforgiving. When the vehicle skidded and rolled down a ravine near Martin's home, he was thrown and killed instantly. He was 61 years old. The baseball world awoke the next day to the shocking news. Billy Martin, the fiery Yankee legend, was gone. The reaction was immediate and heartfelt. Players, fans, and even his fiercest critics mourned. George Steinbrenner called his death a devastating loss, acknowledging that despite their battles, Martin was family to the Yankees. Teammates remembered the scrappy infielder who had once stolen outs with his glove and hits with his bat. Players he managed recalled a man who pushed them harder than anyone but also believed in them more deeply than they believed in themselves. For fans, the loss was personal. Billy Martin had embodied the spirit of New York. Tough, passionate, flawed, and unforgettable. In the years since his passing, Martin's legacy has only grown more complex and more enduring. He is remembered not just for championships or controversies, but for the fire he brought to the game. He represented an era when baseball was as much about personality as it was about statistics. His story remains a reminder that greatness often comes wrapped in imperfection, that passion can both elevate and destroy, and that some figures are too dynamic to ever be fully contained. Billy Martin lived baseball the way he lived life, at full speed, without breaks and without apology. His death on Christmas night was a tragedy, but it was also fitting in its suddenness and drama for a man who had never done anything halfway. He remains, to this day, one of the most compelling characters in baseball history. A man whose name evokes not just memories of games won and lost, but of a spirit that refused to conform. Billy Martin's story is not a neat tale of triumph or tragedy. It is both. He was a champion and a fighter, a genius and a troublemaker, a man adored and a man feared. His life teaches us that greatness does not always come with serenity. Sometimes it comes with fire, chaos, and scars. On the field, Martin gave fans unforgettable memories. The miraculous catch in 1952, the heroics of 1953, the championship of 1977, the daring audacity of Billy Ball. Off the field, he gave baseball its drama, its imperfections, and its humanity. His sudden death on Christmas night in 1989 froze him forever in memory as the man who lived and died with unrelenting intensity. Today, when fans speak of Billy Martin, they speak not only of wins and losses, but of a spirit impossible to replicate. His story is a reminder that life, like baseball, is unpredictable, often unfair, but always worth playing with heart. And so, as the snow of that night fades into history, the fire of Billy Martin remains, not extinguished, but carried on in the echoes of stadium cheers and the hearts of those who love the game.